I knew the Iliad from when I was a student in Hamburg in Germany. I learned at school ancient Greek. I could write it and read it, so we read it. We were forced to read it, and I loved it.
I think part of the reason I always loved the Iliad is Homer refuses to take sides. This is not the epic battle of good versus evil. This is not good guys versus bad guys. It's humans fighting humans, and you have sympathies with either side, and you see that there's good and bad on each side, and you really don't have a rooting interest. I mean, when Hector and Achilles finally fight, you're not, hopefully you're not jumping up and cheering when one of them goes down. Homer's stories, especially the Iliad, but also the Odyssey, is the mother of all stories. I mean, it all comes from there. And it is like sort of a tree, sort of a branch has come out from that one into, over 3,000 years into all literature.
You sure you want to do this? I started this war.
I started working on the movie. It was the first pitch I ever gave. I went into Jeff Robinoff's office. Jeff is one of the big executives at Warner Brothers, now running the studio, and I'd never done this before, and I'm very nervous, and trying to tell the story of Troy, and I'm stuttering and kind of blowing it. I feel like I'm blowing it, and I'm looking in his face, and he's not giving anything away. Jeff would be a great poker player, and at the very end of the pitch, he said, "You ready to start writing?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm ready to start writing."
Well, I have to give, of course, a lot of credit to David Benioff first, who wrote it and found a way to take the story. Because it's not just the Iliad. It's inspired by the Iliad, but he took also other elements, what he found someplace else. Virgil deals a lot with the sacking of Troy. The horse, the Trojan horse, is not part of the Iliad. From the first time I pitched this story, I didn't want to tell just the Iliad section of the story. I wanted to tell the entire Trojan War. So starting from before Paris' seduction of Helen and going through to the fall of Troy. And these were elements that I felt needed to be in the movie. We didn't want to stop the movie midway through. We felt that would be very satisfying. And, as a result of that, many things had to be cut. And the principal one is the gods.
In the Greek tradition, you get the level of the gods, who behave a bit like a sort of rather ill-tempered but superhuman family. They squabble and they bicker, they feast and they laugh together. But they have still awesome power over mankind.
The gods in the Iliad are part of the story. They show up, they fight, they help out, they do this, they manipulate. Not in our story. The gods are there, the religion is there, everything is there, but it's only mentioned. It's not part of the film. I think it would be pretty ridiculous to show that. I cannot even imagine the gods showing up, how to dress a god, and would not work.
I mean, the war lasts 10 years, and for Odysseus, he goes off to war, and it's 10 years in Troy, and then he's got a 10-year sail home to Penelope. So there was radical compression in the movie, and again, that was partly a decision. If there's ever a fork in the road between, taking the road to the left, which is keeping faith with the original text, or the road to the right is what's going to be better for the movie, I would always take the road to the right.
The whole drama, the whole politics, the whole violence, the whole war, thousands and 10,000 of people going to war, is just because two people fall in love. That's something what's also very, very human.
Speaking of my character, I think they made her just a little bit more likable, because I think in the original, she's very vain and very not a very sympathetic character, really, because she does all these horrible things for her own selfish reasons, and the war starts because of her love story.
Helen of Sparta?
Helen of Troy. His justification as a young boy is, how can I leave this beautiful woman in the hands of this animal?
I think what's fascinating about her is also, and we deal with that in the film, is that she's a very sad person. She's not happy. She lives like a ghost in her marriage with Menelaus.
She leads a very unhappy life, living in a golden cage. So I think when she meets Paris, it's like, life finally is starting,
I'll walk right up to him and tell him you're mine.
You're very young, my love.
In approaching Paris as a character was trying to find justification for the actions that he takes, and running away and the dishonourable, you know, finding honour in that.
Is this what you left me for?
It's one of my favourite parts in the script because I think most people at that point are assuming that he's either going to give a death blow to Menelaus at the last second, you know, pull a 44 from his greave and shoot the guy. It's not a very heroic thing what he does, but it makes him very human.
I just had this mantra in my head while I was doing this scene: I want to live, I'm going to live, I want to live for love, I want to live to... Do you know what I mean? You couldn't really get much lower as a character.
If I fall, tell Helen. Tell her.
I will.
Don't let Menelaus hurt her.
You think of your sword and his sword and nothing else.
The thing about Hector I loved was the relationship between him and Paris. I have one brother, an older brother, and I think I recognised immediately my older brother in Hector, and I was the bratty younger brother who got away with murder. So the idea of being able to portray the older brother and have Paris be kind of like a young version of myself, that really appealed to me. I was attracted to it straight away.
What would you have me do?
Put her on a ship and send her home.
I love the fact that he's just about the only person in the whole story that can see what's going to happen and has the wisdom to warn people of what the potential is.
This is my country, and these are my countrymen. I don't want to see them suffer, so my brother can have his prize.
I loved having that voice in the narrative. I think it was really, really exciting.
Wolfgang and I got on extremely well. At the very start of it, basically, I was in his office and he threw a copy of the Iliad at me. And he said, make sure you study that because the battles are actually very descriptive.
One of the very real problems that the filmmakers had was reconstructing warfare and various sorts of action which have to be reconstructed from static evidence. So what we have are pictures, we have frescoes, we have pictures on vase paintings and in other media, but of course they don't move. So to reconstruct war and anything else that involves movement is a really very difficult thing.
The main instruments of war were the spear and shield. Then the wealthy people had swords. And that was sort of it. They had as well, like mallets, for want of a better word, or really simple things like rocks attached to long sticks. But it was really as basic as that. They didn't have anything special. They used to throw rocks. They did not have any specialised formations.
They had how Homer tells us the war was fought, but that's interesting too because what Homer's really interested in the Iliad are the sort of man-to-man, almost single combats. The battle is whirling around them, but what Homer focuses on is one Trojan versus one Greek, and they talk to each other, they taunt each other, and then they fight with each other. And so even in Homer, we get very little picture of the overall sort of layout of the battlefield, the tactics and the shape and the formation of the two armies.
You get this kill zone effect, and then their tactic, the Trojans would then charge, push the remaining sort of front ranks of the Greeks over their dying bodies of their comrades, and then charge them and push them further back. What you actually found out was a lot of people had horses. They used to ride their horses to battle, or the people who had money did, the wealthy ones, rode to battle, then they got off, and then they had a fight, and then they all went home.
They never fight on horseback. They use the horses to send messages and to go ahead and see things, explorers and scouts and all that, but they didn't fight big time on horseback.
The other aspect of Homeric fighting that's interesting is the use of horses and chariots. In fact, that's one of the things that scholars have discussed quite a lot, because you can, of course, in ancient warfare, use a chariot as a platform from which archers shoot. But in Homer, the chariots are used almost entirely as taxis to the battlefield.
It surprised me how they could travel all those long distance, you know, with no saddle, with, you know, how they break their horses. They have no shoes, they had no bits. You get surprised how they made it.
Obviously having to learn how to ride a horse very well without a saddle or stirrups. I'd never ridden a horse before this movie, so I started training back home in Australia months before we started the production, and then kept up that training before the production started in London and all the way through.
Eric Bana had to learn to ride a horse. Hector is a breaker of horses. He's a horseman. Eric Bana had no idea how to ride a horse, so he had to learn all that. Now he's like, it feels like he's born on a horse. He had to learn all that.
And cut it there.
We have to work on this film. We work with chariots, and we work with stunt horses and actors. The big challenge on this film is there is no stirrups or saddles on the horses.
I had some wonderful moments training on a horseback back home, where I had 6 or 8 people basically attack me and try and push me off my horse, just to instill, you know, don't panic when you get in a situation on a set where horses go crazy and people go crazy and you're going to get potentially pushed off your horse or whatever. The most important thing is to not panic, so I don't get too scared by any of that stuff. But when you take a saddle and stirrups out of the equation, it becomes a whole other ball game.
Even if a horse is backing and throwing people away and we have a hard time with him, I still like that horse, you know, because it's part of being a horse is backing and throwing people off. You know.
Let go!
Those are the things that take a lot of work to make yourself safe and make yourself look like you do know what you're doing, but they're lifelong skills that hopefully I'll never lose.
Eric have to throw a spear in a full gallop, and we, you know, he's got to throw it to camera, so you got to be pretty good rider and pretty good spear thrower. He did it on the spot, on the mark, on focus, and we shot a lot in one go.
Get to ride my horse as much as I like, which is fantastic. And I've had some wonderful days on the set, some wonderful moments. It's one of the joys of working on a movie like this, you know. Orlando and I have had many moments galloping along the beach out of company hours on our stallions, and you just turn around to each other and say, you know, how good's it?
The most difficult and challenging stunt we done on this film is to flip over a chariot and really make it somersault in the air. And it was challenging how we do it, because you can't do it like, treat the chariot like a car, because you got 2 horses on it. You can't put any explosive to make it flip over because you got horses on it and people. So you got to carefully work it out. And Simon at the beginning said, I don't know how you're going to do it. But we rehearsed and got it, and Simon always liked it better. At the end, he was happy with it, but we done a good job.
It's a tragedy that is sort of as old as mankind. If you look around today, similar stories everywhere where you look.
I feel like if there's one story that you're going to take and say this has to find a very wide audience, you know, what better story than the story of the Trojan War, which has been with us for thousands of years, in which, you know, every culture from that time forward has found a relevance to. I mean, it resonates. Warfare has changed so much, you know, so dramatically from the time of Homer, from the time of the eras before Homer, and yet, you know, we still read this and we still can find things to learn about warfare. And I think that's proven just by the fact that at West Point, the Iliad is taught to the young cadets. It's continually relevant.
For Troy! Let it burn! Let Troy burn!